Well guys, I was sort of debating making this video, but I've been thinking about it quite a bit now, and I think I'm finally ready to make it. The online video game store, something I talk about so much here on the channel, and it's sort of, kind of where my roots are in selling things on eBay and in e-commerce and selling things online. It's what I started doing, 4 or 5 years ago, was literally buying, lots of video games in bulk, buying from my friends actually is where I started. Then I started, doing the online auctions and whatnot, and buying tons and tons of these video games and reselling them on eBay. Over the past 4 or 5 years though, in addition to working on the video game store, I started doing everything from, growing Instagram pages to setting up Shopify stores, starting other sort of eBay stores, doing things in the wholesale space, even trying, some RA, retail arbitrage, of course, drop shipping on many different platforms, and doing a whole bunch of other things related to e-commerce. And especially more recently in the last year or so, I've really taken that kind of stuff to the next level, and I've sort of left the video game store behind. Obviously, my listings are still up on eBay, and I'm still making sales on there, and I'm still shipping things out. But in terms of actually doing new listings and purchasing more products, I've just basically stopped it altogether. Now, the thing with the video game store is when I started to run it, I never really had, a plan in terms of what my goals were to achieve every single year with it. Looking at the sort of margins I was going to make on the actual items I was selling, I was just, sort of purchasing things for, the lower price, selling them at a higher price and keeping the profit. And it seemed to work pretty well here for the last few years. But with that in mind, all the new businesses I launch these days, even the new store that I started with my friend Airval, and I'll link him down below, who's running the brand new eBay store with me. For all these new projects I start, I always like to do a business model first, some projections as to where I think I can be in a few years, and actually break down the numbers on the business to see if it's actually profitable. And this is something to this day that I still have not done for the video game store, really. I mean, yes, I certainly know my margins on the games, and I certainly know, what they sell for and how much I make per each, item. But on the whole sort of scale, when you look at all the expenses and all the revenue and the potential to actually turn this into something that's worth my time running versus the other things I'm doing, I really don't have a scope as to where it sits on the scale. So that brings us to today's video. Along with all the stuff that I just talked about, we've got a whole bunch of problems to either work through here with the video game store and sort of figure out, and some other problems that we just sort of had to maybe fix before we can even move on and continue running it. So what am I talking about here? This is actually going to probably be a multiple part series about revamping the video game store. And at the end of this series, we will have a decisive answer as to whether or not we want to A, keep running it because the margins are good enough and the items are good enough that we can actually afford to do that and it's worth my time to do it, or we're going to B, shut it down and say goodbye to it forever. Again, it's kind of a hard thing for me and something that I was trying to avoid touching. I was just going to leave it there and let it keep going, but it's taking up a lot of room with the brand new store. We're moving in so much new merchandise, and it's just not efficient to have it there. Just have things sitting there on an inactive eBay page, making a few sales a week. It's just not worth it. So it's finally time that I look into this, get to the bottom of it, see if this business is worth our time, see if it's worth it for you guys to start an online video game store, and that's what we're doing in this series. So I apologize for this super long intro, but basically what we had to establish today are a couple things. Number one, we need to break down the inventory system, and this is something, again, that I've been sort of putting off doing for a long time. We need to break down the inventory system that the video game store uses to figure out if it's efficient or not, which I already know the answer to. It's not efficient at all. So we need to basically recreate a brand new inventory system using some of the techniques I've used on the newer eBay stores and my other businesses, which are going to make this whole store process streamlined. We're basically going to start from scratch with this from the bottom. So if you guys are selling stuff online, you really don't have a good enough foundation for an inventory or accounting system, and you want to know how to build one from scratch, we're going to be doing that in this series. So we got to sort of just talk about that today, plan out some ideas for it. We're not going to get the whole thing done because it's a lot of work, but maybe we could at least start, figuring out, first of all, what inventory is even going to be included in this, and then figure out a much better way to store it and a much better way to organize it online. In addition to that, we have a lot of games and things that aren't listed for that store. So we're going to be going through that, and I'm not sure if we'll be doing that today or whatnot. We'll see what we get to, but we're going to go through a whole bunch of those items. We're going to see, if they're worth listing, if we should be bundling them, if we should be selling them individually, see what needs to be refurbished with the JFJ Easy Pro, and I'm sure a lot of you guys will be excited to get that thing back in use. But we're going to see what kind of, money we can make on those items, and we'll get them all listed on eBay. And then with that all done, I mean, if we have a good accounting system in place and we have, all the games listed and we prove that this business can work, then what we'll do in this series is we'll actually proceed to go and purchase some online auction lots. I'll take you guys through the entire process of how I find them. We will, buy a whole bunch of video games and see how they work. And again, we'll have to, compare that up against the sell-through rate on those items and what kind of margins we can make. But hopefully if we can reach those targets, we could actually do something like that. So without any further ado, I'm going to walk right over to the shelves behind me. We're going to talk about sort of the inefficiencies and the bad part of this inventory system. And maybe through talking it through, I can come up with some ideas in my head, because I'll tell you something, I don't have any ideas right now as to what I could do to change it. So hopefully I can figure out something. But we're gonna walk over there right now. We're gonna take a look at what sort of the problems are with it, what things we could potentially fix with some alternative ideas, and then see if we can identify, sort of something that would work for this system. So here we are over at the shelves, and this is again where everything is stored. And my number one problem is the amount of room that this stuff takes up, because you'll notice over here I've got a lot of the new stuff for the new store. I've got a lot of wholesale stuff over there. I've got plenty of stuff on the desk. And this stuff all kind of has to be consolidated to some extent, because we are running out of room. That stuff over there doesn't even have a spot to go as of right now, and it's just about to get listed and gone through. Also, we've got all this stuff that's still on the receiving shelf. This will all get listed here in the next few days, and well, probably not in the next few days. Okay, I should not be super optimistic, but it will be getting listed probably in the next month or so, and we're gonna need room to put this stuff on the shelves. So if we don't have the room to put it there, we're gonna run into some major problems. So that's sort of my number one issue here. So keep in mind that we are trying to consolidate, save space when doing this. Okay, so why is this such a problem? Well, I built these bin sort of systems here a very long time ago. I didn't physically build them, but I built an online system that worked with these. And the main issue that I ran into here is you'll notice that a lot of the bins are empty. And that's because the system that I use online only allows you to refill a bin with new games when the bin is fully emptied. Otherwise, you can, mismatch and place a game in another bin that has some previously listed items. But for the most part, I would take a stack of 18 games, which is how many of these bins store, from the receiving bins, which are the red ones, not those ones, but these ones over here. I would take 18 games out of the receiving bins that are all from the same lot. I would put them over here, test them, whatever, photo them, get them listed on eBay, and then I would put them into one of these white bins. And every time I did that, I would have to go and buy new bins, and then they just kept taking up more space versus, trying to, put them in every single one of the other bins. And the reason why I couldn't put them in the other bins was that it just ended up taking so long. It just took way too long to actually go through my inventory sheets and place the items in each one of these bins. So here's something that we should talk about right off the bat. The number one way that we're going to fix this solution is we're going to be using an inventory solution called FIFO. This is first in, first out. Currently what's being used is specific identification. That means that every single game in here is listed on the inventory sheet with the price that I paid, in addition to that, where I got it from, the margins that we're going to make on it, the list price, and I had to adjust it every time that I change the list price or send an offer out. So that's a big mess, and that's definitely not necessary, especially for this kind of business where we're doing multiple of the exact same item over and over again, just at a slightly different purchase price. So we're going to be skipping specific identification. We won't know what any of the items are in terms of where we bought them from and what we paid for them. They're going to be basically, you can think of it as averaged out, and we'll go into this a little bit more detailed later, but you can think of it as the items being averaged out at their cost in our inventory system. And even though it will really be first in, first out, we can just think of it like that for now for simplicity's sakes. But that still doesn't change the fact that we need to be able to store them efficiently and be able to pull them when we get the sale on eBay. So when a buyer purchases something, from V17 and I can see that on eBay, I need to be able to know where to find that game. Okay, so with that in mind, I'm going to pitch you guys a couple of my solutions. One of them is to get rid of the bins completely. Take them off the shelf, get rid of them, and get all of them out of here. First of all, that would allow us to store way more games per shelf. Right now we have 18 games per bin. Call it 20. That's 20, 40, 60, 80, 100, 140 games per shelf. I think with these guys gone, we can get about 30, maybe times 2 if you put another stack behind them. We could get upwards of 60, 120, 180 games per shelf at least. I think, in fact, we could probably fit 4 rows, so maybe another 60 on that, maybe 240 games or so. So that'd be helpful, but that would be a lot harder to find things, obviously. You'd have to look through multiple stacks or rows of games, so that's not going to work very well. The other option would be to upgrade to some bigger bins, like this guy right here. This is one of these storage boxes from Staples, and let's take a look here and see how this fits games. Unfortunately, this is not ideal either, because you can see, although it is longer, so that would be efficient, we can't store them like too wide at all. Maybe if we went this way, we could store 2. Actually, this could work. Okay, so that's actually really interesting, guys, is that we can actually store these going that way. And it might be easy because we have these big bins. We can go through them all and sort of figure out, we can store more in each bin, so more will sell per bin, which means that we can restock the bins easier. This might actually not be a bad solution. Again, I'm sort of working this through on camera with you guys, and I hope you don't mind that. I usually come up with solutions and just pitch them to you, but this case, we're actually trying to figure things out. That could be a really good solution, though, and in which case, we're going to have to pull all these bins down, pull all the games out of every single bin, reorganize them into these sort of bins, relabel these bins, then go on eBay and then look at which games are in which bin and relabel them accordingly. It would be a big commitment, which is why I sort of don't want to do it unless we know that it's going to work out perfectly. But basically, this would allow us to technically store more games in each bin, which will make it easier to restock them. This could work really well. So I'll tell you what, guys, I'm gonna actually go on my computer here, run the numbers on these bins, figure out how much can be stored in each one of these, and see if this is gonna work, see how well they store on the shelves, if we can store multiple of them. If this works, I'll go ahead and go online, order, you know, however many of these, maybe just a shelf worth to start off with. But order a whole bunch of these bins and potentially see how this works. Other thing to note is that these bins are actually super tall. Not super tall, but they're almost double the height of a video game. Potentially what we could do is cut them down and then be able to store 2 stacks of them on top of each other. That would allow us to store 4 of these bins per shelf, I believe, because that looks like about half the shelf. So we could do like 1, 2, 3, 4, and have however many games in each one. Okay, I'm gonna go look at the different solutions. So I'm gonna look at, you know, the potentially storing them all on the individual shelves just openly. I'm gonna look at storing them in these size bins. I'm gonna look at storing them in the bins that we currently have, see which one works the best. And if it doesn't make sense to you guys, hopefully it will after I run all the numbers and figure it all out. Okay guys, so I came up with something here. You're going to have to excuse the lack of a screen recorder. I don't have it on this new computer down here just yet, but I will be able to get one soon and we'll be able to do everything else on this series via a screen recorder, so don't expect this for very long. But you can see here, on our first section of notes here, this is just going to be a purchases tabs, or sorry, a purchases, sales, all sort of transactions will be monitored here. It's a transaction log basically. And all it is basically tracking what account was affected by the transaction, what actually happened, the activity that took place, and any notes I have for the transaction. Now, the opening balances here are a little funky. I just made these up on the spot, so they're not exact, but this is an example of how I would transfer everything over from the old system. I would just literally do 3 or 4 transactions like this to transfer all of the assets over, and any sort of liabilities we don't have, but all the assets over from the old sort of system. So how does this work? Well, I would just purchase basically all of the inventory from myself in this new system, so from CL, for $1.72 each, or whatever the average price is I paid for it, and I would put it in here. That's just for the opening balances though, so we have opening balances for all these accounts. But for all of the future transactions, it'll obviously be every single time that I buy a lot, every single time that I sell a game, every single time that I purchase supplies. For the game entries, they'll just be daily, so every single day I'll come here. I'm not going to enter every single sale individually, but just in terms of every single day, what the sale price was in total, and the total number of games will be kept in the notes here with the price. But any sort of supplies, any sort of transaction that happens with the business that has to do with cash will be monitored in here. And then the inventory system is even simpler, and that's over here with this FIFO system, which I was talking about. And the first thing that we're going to have to do here is actually enter our beginning inventory. Let me do that really quickly. All right, that's better. So this is actually the exact same system that I'm using for the brand new eBay store, but this is just a more dumbed down version for the video games because they don't need quite as much information. But anyway, I basically just rebuilt the same sort of thing over here. But here we are. So you can see the first transaction, and a lot of you guys who actually understand accounting, understand the FIFO system here will criticize me for this move. But entering all the new items into my FIFO system, I would do something like this, where I have a transaction here as an opening inventory balance, 1652 items for the price, the total amount that I spent on those items, and I'm purchasing them for myself. Now, a lot of people might ask, why wouldn't I just then do average price system, where I just average out the cost of every single item every time that I purchase them, so there's a new average cost. That is another great option that I could be doing, although it does take quite a bit more time and doesn't give you as accurate of results, especially if prices are always increasing. So I do want to get, the FIFO system up and working. Obviously, though, you're saying, okay, so you're going to have to sell through 1,600 items first before your price changes per unit. Technically, for the first year or two, however long it sells through, it will be basically just an average price unit. But eventually, one day, hopefully, we can switch over to a FIFO unit or to a FIFO system, although it'll be quite difficult, actually, because we'd actually have to sell that all in 1 year, and then we'd have to add in all the next transactions and average that out. That's actually interesting. I'm not sure if I'll be able to do this as a FIFO system. I'm going to see about that. Maybe I could divide these up and enter them as I purchase them for each lot number, but that would require me backtracking and looking at old sales. I got to figure something out here, but that's what I'm trying to do right now. Anyway, here's an example of a transaction that might occur. Purchasing 2 items for $5 at Value Village, $2.50 an item. This would be the exact way that we would track them. I'm not going to fully explain how a FIFO system works, but it stands for first in, first out, which means that every single time that we would sell an item, which will be tracked over here, for example, if you sold 2 items on the second for $14.50, we would take those 2 items out from the top number here, first in, first out. So take 2 out there at that price, and that will be our inventory cost on those 2 items. So it doesn't matter which 2 it was, we would just assume that it's any 2 because they're so similar we couldn't actually identify them specifically. That's how the system works. And I'm sorry, that was sort of more of a rant just for any sort of accounting nerds out there that really wanted to pay attention to this. There are some great videos online about FIFO systems if you want to actually learn, or average unit cost systems that you can use. Anyway, at the end of every month, you come over here to the subtraction tab, subtract what you sold in terms of the actual price. and you determine your ending inventory. Here's a tracker of all the things that we actually sold. You come up here with your cost of goods sold, figure out your merchandise costs, which we would track over here, the ending inventory. Actually, that would be carried over to the next month, but we would take the price that we subtracted in inventory costs and put it right here. Any sort of freight in, which we will have here because we are purchasing things online. We have our eBay fees, our PayPal fees, our shipping, and our inventory adjustments for any sort of broken games that month. And that all gets totaled up for our cost of goods sold for that month. And then we can determine from that our gross revenue coming through here. Less our returns equals our net revenue. I'm gonna have to scroll down here a little bit. Anyway, we've got then our cost of goods sold, which will give us our gross profit, total expenses, which I don't think we're going to be having any of those in this section here. They'll all be kept in the transaction log. But anyway, that gives us our pre-tax profit for each month. Okay, so that's really all I'm going to talk about for the accounting side of things. I realize that this video could be more on the boring side if I keep talking about this kind of stuff. It is my kind of favorite stuff to do, though, is to go and design systems like this that can track different items that you're selling. Hopefully you guys can get a little bit of value out of that. Again, I apologize about not having the screen recorder all set up, but that is what it is. Hopefully you guys could figure out or learn a thing or two about that system. Also, as I get this store going, I will be sort of using that system more and more, and hopefully you guys will maybe start to get a better understanding of it if you follow through with the series, and you can maybe learn how to implement it in your own store, or at least certain aspects of it. But technically speaking, this system should be completely tax compliant. Obviously, the beginning entries there where I just enter them and purchase them for myself is a bad example, but they will be transferred over accordingly with all the proper receipts to back up the sales and the purchases of every single item. So we'll go down without any sort of hassle that way. But anyway, I haven't still figured out a solution for the boxes or for the storing things on shelves, but I do have a couple ideas now. The one major thing that I'm going to change is I'm not going to store any data about where items are stored in my own personal records. Before I had a big sheet which told me exactly where everything's was in the inventory system, and I think that's a little bit extra and it's just not necessary for what we're doing here. eBay is going to store all that item information, so when we list something on eBay, we can type in the bin number or wherever it's going, the shelf number, whatever we choose to use. We can just type that in on eBay and it will just be stored there for the purposes of when it sells. But that number will not be used to track anything else in terms of, the item's cost or anything. Again, we're not using specific identifications, so we don't need to have that implemented. It just needs to tell us where to find the item to ship it out. And so that does have me thinking, with that in mind, we can do some fairly creative things with the inventory system. I mean, first of all, it doesn't all have to be, the same size box. It doesn't have to be, properly designed in any way. For that matter, we could just put a bunch of things on one shelf, call that shelf 1, and then just label all the items in that shelf 1 on eBay. And that way we could just find the items. Now, we wouldn't be able to find them very easily through that method because obviously there'd be way too many items on shelf 1. So I suppose the variable here is trying to find a solution that has a large enough storage space for a whole bunch of games, but not too many where when you sell an item, it takes you too long to go through them all and find them. But at the same time, the solution has to be big enough that we can store enough games and be able to restock the bin without having to look through 35 different bins every single time and being like, oh yeah, there's 2 spots open in this bin, and then go over your computer and type in, 2 games that went into that bin, and then 4 games went into this bin, and whatever it is. We need to be able to have things moving through fairly smoothly, and we basically just need more things per bin so then more things can sell for each bin, leaving more space every time that we go to list things, if that makes any sense. With that all in mind, I am going to try to get creative here over the next day or so and think of a better solution for this whole storage. But with that all out of the way, once we have that sorted out, we are basically ready to move on here. I know, again, we didn't get a whole bunch done today, but that system is in place now, so we will be able to transfer over all of the old items onto the new system. So for next video, we're going to be going over, how many items there are. We got to count everything down here and make sure they're all accounted for in the new sheet. So we're going to go through all of the bins that are, haven't been touched in a year now, that still have items that were received last year or whatever that had to be entered in the sheet. Anything from old lots, anything that's currently listed on eBay, we're going to pull them all out, basically count them all up, make sure they're all included in the new inventory sheet. And then with that, hopefully during that process, we can move all the listed items into their new locations, whether that be, again, consolidated boxes or openly on the shelves, or whatever that solution is, we'll be able to move them and get that all sorted out next episode. Potentially as well, we can do some listing next episode and get the store kind of up and running again to the point where it's making, a couple sales every single day at least, and then eventually get back to, that, 5 to 10 sales a day mark would be pretty sweet right off the bat here. And hopefully there's enough of a market still there. Again, it's been like a year since I've, been touching this realistically. So hopefully there's still enough of a market there where we can get that sort of scale and volume going. Ideally, it should work out pretty smoothly. And again, we're assuming that the margins will be good enough that then we can continue on, purchase some more items, and ideally be able to purchase them for a good enough price to make money and bring them in here and continue the cycle all over again. Okay, with that in mind, I'm going to end today's video here. Again, more of an intro to this series. It won't be happening every other day like the rest of the videos. I'll be interrupting it with many different types of videos. So if this wasn't your style video, first of all, we'll be getting back to the normal sort of listing stuff. We'll be going through stuff all next episode in this series. So hopefully you guys can look forward to that and getting the store really going. By the way, I'm going to be doing full transparency on this as well. All the numbers will be out to you guys every single time that we start to sell things with this new sort of version of the video game store. So if you enjoyed things like the 30-day challenge series, the 60-day challenge series that we're in right now, or even the brand new eBay store, me revealing all the numbers, I'll be able to reveal them all to you now in this brand new series. So once we get everything up and going here and we start making some sales, we can talk about how much we're selling every single month and take it back, a look into it and see how we can increase those sales and do all the things that I usually do to work through selling things on eBay. Okay, with that in mind, stay tuned for next episode, guys. I will have some other videos again coming out in the short term here as well. So, if you're not subscribed to the channel and you want to follow me for other videos like this and other sort of, hustle online kind of content, be sure to hit the subscribe button so you never miss a video. Hit the little bell notification so then you get all notified when the new videos come out. If you have any comments regarding the inventory system that I'm using, any concerns, anything that you want to add, maybe some solutions for me that you could provide me in terms of how I should be storing these things easily. Literally, if you're not following the accounting system here, if you have any ideas as to how you could store an item somewhere efficiently, like a video game, and be able to pick it and pull it on eBay. Just the best way to do that. That's all I'm really looking for in simple terms. So that, would be really appreciated if you could leave those down below. Maybe some solutions that you guys have used in the past. Anyway, I'll stop rambling. Like the video if you liked it, and I'll see you guys all in the next one.